Hey everyone, welcome to Six Path Weeb. This is your go-to channel for anime fanfiction, where we dive into exciting what-if scenarios and explore alternate storylines of our favorite characters. Today's fanfic topic is: what if Tsunade raised and abandoned Naruko? Imagine a world where the legendary Sannin, Tsunade, took Naruko under her wing. How would this change her fate? Would she become an even stronger kunoichi? Let's dive in and find out. Disclaimer: the content on this channel is purely for entertainment and discussion purposes. I do not own any of the anime footage or characters featured in my videos. All rights belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Alright, let's get started. Kushina awoke feeling more drained than she had ever experienced before. As her eyes fluttered open, she groggily took in the stark white ceiling of the hospital. Attempting to sit up, a wave of pain coursed through her body with every movement. Then, the memories of the previous night came flooding back, bringing with them a deep sorrow. She recalled the sacrifice her husband had made, giving his life to seal away the formidable entity that had threatened the village. A pang of grief struck her as she remembered how he had divided the yin and yang halves of the powerful chakra, sealing them within Mito and Narumi, while entrusting the soul of the entity to their daughter, Naruko. With great effort, Kushina reached for the edge of the bed, allowing her feet to rest against the cold, tiled hospital floor as she slowly attempted to stand. Just then, the door clicked open, and in walked Jiraiya, Tsunade, Hiruzen, and Kakashi. They all appeared taken aback to see Kushina already awake and attempting to stand. Tsunade quickly moved to her side, steadying her as she stumbled. Kushina, even with your Uzumaki resilience, having a tailed beast extracted from you has taken a serious toll. You need to rest and let your body recover, she scolded gently. However, Kushina barely acknowledged her words. Helping her back onto the bed, Tsunade carefully examined her medical charts before speaking again. You'll need at least a week of complete rest, but the damage to your chakra pathways is extensive. It will take years of rehabilitation before you can safely use shinobi techniques again. Kushina nodded in understanding, offering a small smile, which Tsunade returned before stepping away. Alright, I have other patients to check on, Tsunade said before leaving. Hiruzen gave her a grateful nod, appreciating her return to the village in its time of need. Even if it was only temporary, her medical expertise had already saved many lives, patients whom the medical staff had nearly given up on. He couldn't be prouder of his former student. Turning his attention back to Kushina, he noticed her deep in thought. Gently placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder, he watched as she snapped out of her daze and offered a faint smile. Yet, he could see the pain she was trying to hide. Kushina, where are my children? She asked, her voice tinged with emotion. Please bring them to me. Hiruzen nodded, and the three men approached the cribs, carefully lifting the peacefully sleeping infants into their arms. Jiraiya and Hiruzen handed over the twin red-haired girls, who had clearly inherited their mother's Uzumaki traits. Their sleepy violet eyes briefly opened before they nestled comfortably against her, quickly drifting back to sleep. The sight warmed the hearts of the three men, who smiled at the tender moment. Then, Kakashi stepped forward, cradling the third child in his arms. Kushina's gaze shifted to the small blonde bundle, and her breath caught in her throat. As she laid eyes on Naruko for the first time, the faint whisker-like marks on her cheeks immediately drew her attention. In an instant, the events of the previous night played out in her mind, the devastating moment when Minato had shielded their daughter, sacrificing himself as he sealed the entity's soul within her. Without thinking, her hand lashed out, knocking Kakashi's hand away. Kakashi instinctively tightened his hold, steadying Naruko so she wouldn't wake. The baby stirred slightly at the sudden movement, but Kakashi gently rocked her, soothing her back into a peaceful slumber. A faint smile formed beneath his mask as he observed how much she resembled his late sensei. Hiruzen and Jiraiya, having witnessed Kushina's reaction, exchanged concerned glances. A heavy feeling settled in Hiruzen's chest as he hesitantly voiced his thoughts. Kushina, what's wrong? Don't you want to hold your daughter? He asked gently. Kushina's eyes, usually so warm, were now cold and unreadable as she met his gaze. That is no longer my daughter, she stated firmly, her tone devoid of warmth. The room fell into stunned silence. Jiraiya's expression hardened as he processed her words, disbelief evident in his eyes. Kushina, what are you saying? Naruko is your daughter, he insisted in a low voice, careful not to disturb the sleeping children. Kushina, however, remained resolute, her gaze unwavering. No, my daughter was lost the moment Minato sealed the soul of the Kyuubi within her. She is merely a vessel for the creature that took my husband's life and nearly destroyed our village, Kushina said coldly, her eyes filled with bitterness. She glared at the small blonde bundle in Kakashi's arms, who instinctively took a step back, holding the infant protectively. Hiruzen was taken aback by her words, unable to believe the depth of resentment in her gaze. Kushina, you can't mean that. That is your daughter. Just look at her, she has Minato's features, the same strong Namikaze lineage. Don't let grief cloud your judgment, he said gently, trying to reason with her. Jiraiya, standing nearby, nodded. You were a Jinchuriki yourself, Kushina. You understand better than anyone that the child is not the beast. His voice was calm, though there was an unmistakable firmness in his tone. Kushina's expression darkened as she shook her head. That thing took my husband from me. Those marks on her cheeks prove it. Minato must have made a mistake during the sealing, and now the creature has taken hold. It would be best to put an end to this before more harm is done. Jiraiya, Kakashi, and Hiruzen all stiffened at her words, their expressions turning cold. I expected better from you, Kushina, Hiruzen said solemnly. Without another word, he turned on his heel and walked out, followed closely by Jiraiya and Kakashi. The three men sat in silence on a bench in the hallway, deep in thought. The infant in Kakashi's arms stirred uncomfortably, her tiny face scrunching up. Kakashi tried soothing her, but she only grew more restless. Despite their best efforts, the child remained uneasy, letting out small whimpers. Tsunade, who had been walking down the hallway, paused at the sight of the three struggling with the baby. Rolling her eyes, she stepped forward and gently took the little girl from Kakashi's arms. The moment Tsunade held her, Naruko immediately calmed down. She nestled into the warmth of Tsunade's embrace, her big blue eyes staring up at the woman with curiosity. Tsunade smiled and ran her fingers over the child's whisker-like birthmarks, finding her utterly adorable. Aren't you a sweet little thing? Tsunade cooed, rubbing Naruko's back gently. The baby responded with a tiny giggle, making the three men gape in astonishment. They watched as Naruko yawned, her small body relaxing against Tsunade. Within moments, she was sound asleep, snuggled securely in her arms. Tsunade turned to the men, her expression shifting into one of confusion. Why are you three handling her instead of Kushina? The question made them all look away in shame. Well, you see. Kushina has chosen to abandon Naruko. She believes the Kyuubi has taken over her body, Hiruzen admitted, his voice filled with regret. Tsunade's expression darkened. What? She asked in a dangerously low tone. Kakashi hesitated before speaking. She even went as far as to suggest that the child should be, he stopped himself, shaking his head. The council and some villagers are pressuring Hiruzen to either exile her or worse. Hiruzen sighed deeply. With Kushina turning away from her, Naruko has nowhere to go. The orphanage is not safe, and once the truth of her heritage comes out, her father's enemies will surely come after her. Kakashi, looking thoughtful, suddenly spoke up. Jiraiya-sama, why don't you adopt her? She'd be safe with you. Jiraiya grew visibly uneasy.
Well, I manage the village's spy network, Kakashi.
My life is constantly at risk, and I can't afford to be responsible for a child, especially one who needs protection. Besides, I'm not exactly the parenting type, he said with an awkward laugh. Hiruzen shook his head. I would take her in myself, but with my duties as Hokage and everything happening right now, I wouldn't be able to give her the care she needs. Both men turned to Kakashi, who immediately stiffened.
I can't, he admitted softly.
I have my Anbu responsibilities. And he looked down at the sleeping child, his voice heavy with emotion. She reminds me too much of Sensei. It hurts to see her and be reminded of everything we've lost. The three men fell silent again, lost in thought. Tsunade, having heard enough, scoffed. Unbelievable, she muttered. The men looked at her questioningly. To think that you'd all stand here making excuses. Minato gave his life for this village, and yet his daughter, his only child, is being cast aside by the very people he protected. This is not the village my grandfather and granduncle dreamed of. They built Konoha so that no child would ever have to suffer the way they did. And yet, here we are. Her voice was laced with disappointment. The three men averted their gazes, shame washing over them. Tsunade took a deep breath and then, with firm resolve, declared, if none of you are willing to step up, then I will. I'll raise Naruko myself. Hiruzen's eyes widened with a glimmer of hope. So, does this mean you're staying in the village? Tsunade let out a bitter chuckle. No. After what I've seen tonight, I have no intention of staying in this village. I will leave, retire from the shinobi forces, and raise Naruko somewhere safe, far away from those who would wish her harm. Hiruzen's face fell. Tsunade, you can't be serious. The village needs you, and Naruko belongs here. Minato wanted his child to grow up in Konoha. Tsunade met his gaze with a cold stare. And yet, this village has already turned its back on her. If this is the Konoha Minato dreamed of, then it is a dream that has failed. Her words left a heavy silence in the air, the weight of reality settling upon them all. I came here to help the people of this village recover after the attack. When I heard about the devastation, I knew I had to step in. I was planning to retire anyway, but I suppose fate had a different path in store for me. The heavens gifted me a wonderful child to care for and cherish, Tsunade whispered softly, placing a gentle kiss on Naruko's forehead. Hiruzen Sarutobi smiled, though there was sadness in his expression. He knew she was right, there was little he could do to convince her to stay. Besides, Naruko's safety was uncertain in the village at the moment. There were whispers among some villagers, plotting ways to remove her, while the council was more concerned with keeping her separated from the so-called hero twins of the Uzumaki clan. Their misguided belief was that keeping her isolated would prevent the powerful entity sealed within her from regaining strength. But Tsunade, what about those who might seek revenge on her because of her father's enemies? You would be safer here than outside the village, Jiraiya said, hoping to dissuade her. He knew how much the village needed her skills as a legendary Sannin, especially now. Tsunade, however, was unimpressed by the attempt to keep her bound to the village. Please, Jiraiya. I am one of the Sannin, and my skills are far from dull. Since overcoming my fears, I have refined my abilities once again. Besides, I doubt anyone from Iwa or Kumo would be reckless enough to target a child and risk Konoha's retaliation. They are still recovering from the last war and won't act foolishly, at least, not for now. Nothing you say will change my mind. I am leaving, she stated firmly. Jiraiya hesitated but ultimately nodded, recognizing that she was right. Kakashi remained silent, knowing that Tsunade would provide Naruko with the love and guidance of a mother, something he himself had longed for. He was happy for his late sensei's legacy. All right, Sarutobi-sensei. I'll submit my retirement papers to your office tomorrow morning, along with the adoption documents for Naru-chan. We will leave by noon after finalizing everything, Tsunade declared. Hiruzen nodded, though reluctantly. He understood there was nothing he could say that would change her decision. I have done what I could for the injured and left the necessary treatments with the medical staff. If that's all, I will be retiring to the Senju compound for the night. Naruko and I need rest, she said as she stood up. The others watched her leave, their expressions tinged with guilt. The truth she had spoken about their shortcomings would weigh on them for a long time. Senju compound. Tsunade walked through the expansive Senju compound, making her way to the clan leader's residence. This part of the village had remained mostly untouched by the destruction, protected by the barrier seals her grandmother had crafted long ago. Even after all these years, they still held strong. Passing through the gate, she ascended the stone steps leading to the grand two-story home. Despite its age, the house retained its elegance and charm. She stepped inside, the barrier allowing her through as it recognized her chakra signature. Moving toward the master bedroom, she gently placed Naruko on the large bed before heading to the bathroom to change into her sleepwear. Emerging in a white robe with her hair cascading freely down her back, she sat on the bed, lifting Naruko into her arms. A soft creak of the door alerted her, and she knew Shizune had returned. Shizune slid open the door, only to freeze in surprise, nearly dropping the small bag she carried. Her eyes widened at the sight of Tsunade holding a small child with golden hair, looking at her with undeniable affection. Tsunade-sama. Who is this child? She asked, stunned. Her voice stirred Naruko, who yawned sleepily before opening her bright blue eyes, gazing at Shizune with curiosity. As Shizune sat down beside them, Naruko remained focused entirely on Tsunade, fascinated by her presence. Tsunade smiled warmly and kissed Naruko's forehead, making the little girl giggle happily. Just then, Naruko tugged gently at Tsunade's robe, a clear sign that she was hungry. Realizing it had been hours since she had last eaten, Tsunade activated a special medical technique. Shizune watched in astonishment as Naruko began feeding, completely bewildered by what she was witnessing. How? She stammered. Tsunade chuckled at her apprentice's reaction. This is a medical technique I developed to help orphaned infants who have lost their mothers and need nourishment. I proposed introducing it at the hospital, but the council rejected the idea, claiming it was a waste of time and resources better spent training combat medics. However, as you can see, it has its uses. By channeling medical chakra, the technique stimulates the mammary glands, allowing milk production. It requires precise chakra control, or it could cause health complications. As of now, I am the only one skilled enough to use it safely, she explained. Shizune listened in awe, deeply impressed by Tsunade's medical expertise. She watched as Naruko nestled contently in Tsunade's arms, a peaceful expression on both their faces. A warm smile spread across Shizune's lips. She hadn't seen Tsunade look this happy in years. "Who is she, Tsunade-sama?" she asked gently. Tsunade adjusted Naruko in her arms as the little girl latched onto her other side, turning to Shizune with a soft, affectionate smile. "I have adopted her, Shizune. Her name is Naruko. Kushina has chosen to leave her behind, but she is actually Minato's daughter and carries the spirit of the Kyuubi within her. The entire village, including her mother, has distanced themselves from her and is treating her unfairly. I won't allow that. I will take her away from this village and leave tomorrow. I will submit my retirement papers in the morning along with the adoption documents, and we will depart by noon." Tsunade spoke firmly. Shizune's eyes widened in shock. She could hardly believe that people would act this way towards an innocent child. She watched as Naruko curiously observed her surroundings. Tsunade smiled gently, adjusting her robe before releasing the transformation jutsu she had been using. Naruko's bright cerulean eyes locked onto hers, filled with curiosity. Then, for the first time, she turned to look at Shizune. Shizune gasped at the sight of the little girl's beautiful blue eyes staring up at her with wonder. Hesitantly, she reached out and cradled Naruko in her arms. She had to resist the overwhelming urge to exclaim how adorable the child was. Naruko shifted her gaze back to Tsunade and reached out, signaling that she wanted to be held by her again. Tsunade smiled, taking Naruko into her embrace as the child snuggled happily against her. Shizune was amazed at how quickly Naruko had grown attached to Tsunade. "She really adores you, Tsunade-sama," Shizune whispered as she watched Naruko's eyelids grow heavy with sleep. Tsunade nodded, her expression softening. "Of course. She is my daughter now." Her voice carried warmth and happiness, something Shizune hadn't heard from her in years. Shizune smiled before quietly leaving the room to give them time to rest. As Tsunade lay down, her head resting on the pillow, she turned to look at the small blonde beside her. "Do you like having me as your mother, Naru-chan?" she whispered softly. Naruko responded by placing her tiny hand on Tsunade's cheek, rubbing it gently. Tsunade placed her own hand over Naruko's and pulled her closer. The little girl snuggled into the crook of her neck, completely at ease. Tsunade couldn't help but smile. It was as if Naruko truly understood her words. Closing her eyes, she allowed herself to drift into sleep, feeling a deep sense of contentment for the first time in years. "Good night, Naru-chan," she whispered before sleep claimed them both. The next morning, Tsunade woke up with a yawn, feeling a small warmth nestled against her. She glanced down and saw Naruko still cuddled against her, her tiny breath tickling Tsunade's neck. A fond smile formed on Tsunade's lips. Carefully, she sat up with Naruko still in her arms. As if sensing her movement, Naruko yawned, her curious cerulean eyes blinking up at Tsunade. The sight of those bright blue orbs and that tiny, sleepy smile captivated Tsunade. She realized with some surprise that Naruko hadn't cried once since the previous night, even after facing such a harsh situation. After feeding Naruko and gently rubbing her back until she burped, Tsunade freshened up both herself and the little girl. She then sat in the warm bath water, holding Naruko securely in her arms. The little one giggled and splashed at the water, filling the room with cheerful laughter. Tsunade found herself laughing along, feeling lighter than she had in years. Once they were both ready, Tsunade walked over to her dresser. She decided to forego her usual green jacket, instead choosing a white full-sleeved battle kimono that allowed for ease of movement. She then dressed Naruko in a fresh diaper, wrapped her snugly in a soft blue blanket adorned with the Senju clan symbol, and tied her own hair into a loose bun, securing it with a senbon. As she stepped out onto the village streets, she quickly noticed the curious stares directed at her. The villagers whispered among themselves, trying to guess the identity of the child in her arms. Some speculated whether the blonde-haired girl was Tsunade's own daughter. Ignoring the murmurs, Tsunade glanced down at Naruko, who was happily playing with a loose strand of her hair. Smiling, she continued walking towards the Hokage Tower. Hokage Tower, Hokage's office. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat at his desk, battling the never-ending pile of paperwork. He let out a weary sigh, wondering if it would ever be finished. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts, providing a welcome break. "Come in," he called. The door opened, and Tsunade entered, carrying Naruko wrapped securely in the blue blanket. The third Hokage immediately noticed the familiar golden hair peeking out and smiled at his former student. He had a feeling this decision would be good for both Tsunade and Naruko. Without hesitation, Tsunade placed a scroll on his desk, its official Senju clan seal clearly visible. Hiruzen sighed, already knowing what it contained. Tsunade, you don't need to retire. You have many years ahead of you, and as a Sannin, you already have travel privileges. You can leave without officially retiring, he tried to reason with her one last time. Tsunade scoffed lightly. That would mean the village could recall me at any time in case of trouble. I don't want to return unless I choose to, and not until Naru-chan is ready. Hiruzen sighed but nodded, understanding her stance. He unsealed the scroll, stamped it, and handed it to his secretary, knowing full well that the council would not take the news lightly. Then, he pulled out the official adoption papers and placed them in front of her. Tsunade sat down and took the brush, signing the documents. Once done, Hiruzen stamped them with his official seal, finalizing the process. Sarutobi-sensei, this adoption is fully recognized, correct? I mean, Kushina is still her biological mother. Tsunade asked hesitantly. Hiruzen waved a hand dismissively. I took care of the paperwork last night. Kushina has officially removed Naruko from the Uzumaki clan and severed all ties with her. Tsunade frowned slightly but remained silent as he continued. Kushina requested Minato's inheritance, but unfortunately for her, most of his assets were designated for their other children. Naruko was left only a small portion. However, Minato did leave all of his personal knowledge and techniques to Naruko, assuming that Kushina would take care of her. Hiruzen handed Tsunade several scrolls bearing the Namikaze clan seals. Tsunade smiled as she accepted them. I don't care about the money. The Senju fortune is more than enough, and these scrolls will be far more valuable to Naru-chan in the future. Hiruzen nodded. I suggest keeping her name as Naruko Senju for now and avoiding the Namikaze name until any lingering resentment fades. Tsunade looked down at Naruko and cooed, how do you like your new name, Naru-chan? Naruko Senju, it has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? The little girl giggled happily, making both adults smile. So, Tsunade, where do you plan to go now? Hiruzen asked. Tsunade continued playing with Naruko as she answered. There's an old Senju compound from the Warring States era. My grandfather used to take me there as a child. It's spacious, protected by my grandmother's and granduncle's seals, and there's a small village nearby for supplies. Hardly anyone knows about it anymore, making it the safest place for Naru-chan right now. Hiruzen sighed. And when will you return? Tsunade frowned slightly. I don't know, sensei. Maybe when the village has moved past its hatred and Naru-chan has grown. If the villagers refuse to change. Then I might never come back, unless she wants to. Hiruzen could only hope the village would change in time. I suppose this is goodbye for now, sensei, Tsunade said, standing up. Hiruzen nodded, walking her to the door. With Naruko securely in her arms, Tsunade left, picking up supplies for the journey before heading toward the Senju compound, her new home with Naruko. Tsunade entered the room, noticing Shizune diligently packing up their belongings. She smiled, appreciating the help, and settled onto a cushion in the spacious, traditionally designed Japanese living area. Shizune soon finished her task, walked over, and took a seat across from her, returning the smile. Tsunade-sama, did everything go smoothly? She inquired, pouring tea for both of them. Tsunade gratefully accepted the cup, taking a small sip before placing it down on the table. Yes, Shizune, everything went perfectly. From today onward, our little Naru-chan will be known to the world as Naruko Senju, and as my daughter, she is now officially recognized as the heir to the Senju clan. Tsunade spoke with warmth, and Shizune's face lit up with joy. That means I'm officially a big sister now. She cheered. I have a little sister to look after. She beamed happily as she lifted the baby girl into her arms. Now, Naru-chan, I'm your big sister. You like me, don't you? Isn't your big sister the best? She cooed, earning an adorable giggle from Naruko. Over the past 2 days, the little girl had brought so much happiness into their lives, and Tsunade was pleased to see her becoming comfortable with Shizune as well. Shizune, is everything ready? Can we leave now? Tsunade asked. Yes, Tsunade-sama. Everything is packed, and we can depart whenever you're ready, Shizune confirmed. Tsunade gently took Naruko from Shizune's arms, and together, they sealed their belongings into storage scrolls. Each time an item disappeared in a small puff of smoke, Naruko let out a delighted giggle. However, When everything had been sealed away, she pouted slightly in disappointment. Laughing at her adorable reaction, Tsunade hugged her close, rubbing her cheek against Naruko's, making her giggle once again. With everything prepared, the two of them picked up their storage scrolls and headed towards the village gates. At the village gates. As Tsunade arrived at the gates, she noticed a small group waiting for her: Hiruzen, Kakashi, Jiraiya, and the 3 village elders. She frowned slightly, wondering what they wanted. Approaching them, she saw Koharu and Homura step forward with warm smiles. Tsunade, however, merely nodded in acknowledgement without much expression. Their smiles faltered slightly at her cool response, and she noticed the fleeting look of disapproval on their faces when their gaze shifted to Naruko. Tightening her hold on the sleeping child, Tsunade remained composed as they spoke. "Tsunade-chan, why are you choosing to retire and leave the village?" Koharu asked kindly. "You have the right to travel freely as a Sannin, and we've never forced you into anything all these years. If you stay, we can reinstate your status, and all of this can be forgotten. There's no need for you to leave." Tsunade took a deep breath before responding. "I no longer wish to be tied to this village. My priority is Naru-chan, and she needs my full attention. I've already given enough to the village. I fought in 2 wars, I lost people dear to me, and now it's time I step away and live for myself." Homura spoke up next. "But Tsunade-chan, this is the village your ancestors built. The village still needs the strength of a Sannin, especially the last Senju of this generation. You shouldn't leave, and certainly not for the sake of that." He hesitated before lowering his voice, muttering, "That child." Tsunade's gaze sharpened. "Watch your words," she warned in a cold tone. "That child is my daughter, the heir to the Senju clan and the daughter of Minato Namikaze." Homura flinched at her stern response but quickly masked it with a frown. Just then, Danzo spoke, his voice calm yet calculated. "You should reconsider, Tsunade. What would your grandfather and granduncle think of you abandoning the village?" He attempted to guilt-trip her, but Tsunade wasn't moved. "They would be disappointed in what this village has become, especially in the actions of some of their own students," she replied pointedly, making Danzo's expression darken. He understood the hidden meaning behind her words but chose not to press further. Realizing she wouldn't be swayed, the 3 elders finally stepped back, allowing Hiruzen, Kakashi, and Jiraiya to approach. "Well, Tsunade," Hiruzen said with a gentle smile, "keep in touch with your old sensei, all right?" Tsunade gave a small smile in return and nodded. Kakashi, looking a bit nervous, rubbed the back of his head. "Please take care of Naruko, Tsunade-sama. I can't think of anyone better to raise her. Maybe one day, you could bring her back for a visit?" Tsunade smiled at his sincerity. "Don't worry, Kakashi. I'll take good care of her. After all, she's my daughter. You'll see her again someday." Kakashi gave an eye smile and nodded. Jiraiya, grinning proudly, crossed his arms. "Well, Tsunade-heim, you don't have to worry about me. I'll be visiting soon. I can't stay away from my precious goddaughter for too long. After all, Minato did name her after a character from my book." Tsunade smirked. "Yes, the only book you've ever written that's actually worth something." Jiraiya gasped dramatically. "Hey! I'll have you know my books are bestsellers. Even Kakashi and Sensei appreciate my literary genius." Tsunade raised an eyebrow as she glanced at Hiruzen and Kakashi, who both quickly looked away, pretending not to hear. Jiraiya, still grinning, leaned in with a mischievous glint in his eyes. "And who knows, maybe you could help me out with some." Before he could finish, Tsunade sent him flying into the village wall with a single punch. Jiraiya groaned in defeat as Hiruzen and Kakashi's sweat dropped at the all-too-familiar scene. After exchanging farewells, Tsunade turned and walked away, Naruko safe in her arms. Shizune followed closely behind as they left for the Senju's hidden compound, a peaceful smile gracing Tsunade's face. The once abandoned Senju compound was now full of life, no longer serving as a hidden refuge but as a peaceful home. The vast fields were lush with greenery, nurtured by Hashirama Senju himself, while a crystal-clear stream flowed through the heart of the compound, sourced from underground, a lasting testament to Toburama Senju's mastery over water. Standing gracefully to the side was an elegant, traditional 2-story Japanese house, radiating the same refined beauty as other great clan estates, such as the Hyuga compound. Sitting on the wooden porch, Tsunade watched fondly as a small blonde girl giggled while playing with Katsuyu, the little slug happily nestled in her arms. The child crawled around with excitement, her laughter echoing through the compound. Tsunade stood up and approached her, crouching a few feet away with open arms, encouraging her to come closer. Naruko's attention immediately shifted from Katsuyu as she turned toward Tsunade, crawling eagerly. Just as she reached out, Tsunade playfully stepped back, prompting a confused tilt of Naruko's head. She pouted, her cheeks puffing up adorably, making Tsunade struggle not to scoop her up right then and there. Giggling, Tsunade repeated the gesture, opening her arms once more. Naruko's face brightened, and she resumed crawling, only for Tsunade to step back again. Naruko plopped onto the ground, puffing her cheeks even more, which only made Tsunade laugh. Watching from the side, Shizune smiled at the heartwarming scene between mother and daughter. Tsunade's gentle teasing never made Naruko cry. At most, she would puff up her cheeks in protest. It was endearing to see the bond they shared. Then, something remarkable happened. Tsunade opened her arms again, and instead of crawling, Naruko pressed her small hands to the ground, wobbling as she attempted to stand. Both Tsunade and Shizune gasped in surprise. Naruko took a shaky step forward. Tsunade's eyes widened, and Shizune clasped her hands over her mouth, holding her breath. Naruko took another step, but her expression wavered with uncertainty. Sensing her hesitation, Tsunade encouraged her gently, her voice thick with emotion. "Come on, Naru-chan. Just a little more. Come to Ka-chan." Naruko took 5 small steps before stumbling forward. Just before she could fall, Tsunade caught her in a warm embrace, cradling her close. As she held her, she realized Naruko was looking at her with concern, her tiny hand reaching up to wipe away the tears that had unknowingly formed in Tsunade's eyes. Understanding dawned on Tsunade. Naruko had pushed herself so much just to make her happy. "Oh, Naru-chan, you walked so much just because I cried," Tsunade whispered, holding her tightly. "I love you so much, my little one." Naruko snuggled into her embrace, making Tsunade smile. She gazed into Naruko's bright blue eyes, which always seemed to draw her in, and placed a soft kiss on her nose. Naruko scrunched up her face in response, making Tsunade giggle. "Oh, you're Ka-chan's little fox, aren't you, Naru-chan?" she cooed, peppering her with kisses as Naruko laughed. Shizune soon joined in, playfully tickling the little girl. Their laughter was suddenly interrupted by a voice. "Hey! It's not fair for two ladies too." Before the voice could finish, a barrage of kunai and senbon rained down on the spot where Jiraiya had just been standing. He paled instantly. "Gang up on my goddaughter," he finished weakly. Then, he let out a loud, indignant shout. "Hey! What was that for? That could have been dangerous." Shizune lowered her senbon launcher, and Tsunade calmly put away the remaining senbon she had been preparing to throw. "Maybe if you visited like a normal guest instead of sneaking around, you wouldn't get such a warm welcome," Tsunade said, arms crossed. She smirked. "Honestly, I wouldn't mind if your antics stopped altogether. It'd be nice if the girls could relax without worrying about interruptions." Naruko clapped her hands, giggling, while Tsunade flashed Jiraiya a knowing look. He grumbled something about ungrateful blondes, making Shizune laugh. "Even my own goddaughter is against me. What has the world come to?" he lamented, pretending to wipe away tears. Naruko, ever the kind soul, patted his head as if to comfort him. Jiraiya's fake tears turned into real ones, and Tsunade and Shizune burst out laughing. "So, what brings you here, Jiraiya?" Tsunade asked, raising an eyebrow. Jiraiya clutched his chest dramatically. "Oh, you wound me, Haim. Can a godfather come to visit his dear goddaughter and bring her an early birthday present?" He pulled out a small wrapped bundle and handed it to Tsunade. Inside was a cap designed like a toad, making it seem as if it would swallow whoever wore it. There were also stuffed toys, mostly toads. Tsunade narrowed her eyes at him. "You're not trying to get her to sign the toad summoning contract before me, are you?" Jiraiya whistled innocently. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Haim." Meanwhile, Naruko clutched one of the stuffed toads happily, causing Jiraiya to break into a celebratory dance. "See? She's already drawn to the great toad sage Jiraiya," he declared, dancing atop a large samurai toad, which let out an awkward croak. Tsunade and Shizune stared at him blankly. Naruko, however, clapped and giggled. Jiraiya picked Naruko up, rubbing his cheek against hers. "Oh, finally. Someone who appreciates true talent." Shizune gently took Naruko from him, and a moment later, bam! Jiraiya's head met the ground. "Talent, huh?" Tsunade cracked her knuckles. "That was pathetic." Shizune and Naruko giggled as they watched Tsunade and Jiraiya bicker over what type of summons Naruko would choose in the future. "Let's go have some hot chocolate. You like that, don't you, Naru-chan? Shizune asked. Naruko nodded eagerly, and the two of them headed inside, leaving the two adults to their debate. A few minutes later, Tsunade entered with a victorious smirk, while Jiraiya, sporting a fresh lump on his head, muttered about how strong women always won arguments through sheer force. What was that? Tsunade asked sweetly, a rather ominous aura surrounding her. Jiraiya gulped and waved his hands in defense. And nothing, Tsunade Heim. Satisfied, Tsunade sat beside Naruko, who was happily sipping her hot chocolate from a small mug. With a playful pout, she sighed. Ah, if only someone would appreciate Ka-chan like this too. Jiraiya wisely chose to remain silent, sipping his own drink while Shizune stifled a laugh. As Naruko giggled between sips, the warmth of the moment filled the room, wrapping them all in the comfort of family. Oh, Naru-chan doesn't even share her hot chocolate with Ka-chan. I'm heartbroken, she said, pretending to cry. Naruko looked up at her with a sad expression before tugging on her kimono. When she glanced down, she saw Naruko holding out her mug along with the small toad she had received from Jiraiya, her eyes watering as she sniffled. Immediately, she was scooped up into warm arms and giggled as she was tickled. She snuggled into the embrace, resting her face against Tsunade's neck, making the older woman smile. She really adores you, doesn't she, Heim? Jiraiya remarked with a rare moment of sincerity, his expression genuinely happy. Shizune nodded with a soft smile. Yes, Jiraiya-sama. Naruko rarely cries, even when she gets hurt. But the moment Tsunade-sama is sad or shedding tears, her eyes well up, and she clings to her. She can't stand seeing Tsunade-sama upset, it's the only time she comes close to crying. Jiraiya nodded in understanding as he watched Tsunade playfully tickle Naruko. Of course, she loves me the most, don't you, Naru-chan? Tsunade teased, playfully running her fingers over the little girl's stomach. Naruko giggled, attempting to shield herself with the stuffed toad, but it was no use. Jiraiya observed the scene with a nostalgic smile. He had never seen anyone bond with a child so closely, not even Kushina with her own twins. Considering how devoted Kushina had been as a mother, that said a lot. So, Jiraiya, why aren't you in Konoha? I heard Kushina is hosting a big celebration for the twins. With all the festivities, it's unusual for you to be here instead, Tsunade remarked as she carefully helped Naruko drink her hot chocolate, wiping her mouth gently with a small towel. Jiraiya puffed out his chest. Tsunade Heim, I don't need a festival to enjoy myself. People are naturally drawn to my legendary charm and wisdom. He paused dramatically before striking a pose. After all, I am the great toad sage, Jiraiya. With a flourish, he summoned the same small samurai toad from earlier. Naruko clapped her hands, giggling in delight, while Tsunade sighed. You really shouldn't encourage him, Naru-chan. He's already too much to handle, she said, rubbing her forehead. Jiraiya looked offended. Hey! What's that supposed to mean? Naruko simply giggled as Jiraiya sulked in the corner, muttering about not receiving the respect he deserved. Just then, a knock on the door caught their attention. Tsunade raised an eyebrow, wondering who it could be, since only a few people had access to bypass the barrier around the compound. When she opened the door, she found Kakashi standing there, giving her a lazy wave. Yo, he greeted casually. Tsunade's sweat dropped at his laid-back attitude. Kakashi, what are you doing here? With the festival in the village, I thought the Anbu would be needed more than ever right now. She ushered him inside. Kakashi rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Well, Tsunade-sama, I had a little extra time before my mission starts, so I thought I'd visit before heading off for duty. Besides, I figured I'd report in a bit later. Tsunade chuckled. No one would be surprised if you were late anyway. Kakashi simply gave her his signature smile as they entered the living room. His gaze landed on Jiraiya, and he was surprised to see him there. Meanwhile, across the room, Shizune was struggling to push Jiraiya away from Naruko, who was curiously watching as he tried to show her a book. What exactly is going on here? Tsunade asked, narrowing her eyes. Jiraiya immediately shoved the book out of sight and slapped a hand over Shizune's mouth, grinning innocently. Oh, nothing at all, Heim. Just playing with Naru-chan, and Shizune wanted to join in. He let out a nervous laugh. Tsunade sighed, clearly unconvinced, but let it go. Shizune, on the other hand, glared at Jiraiya. Kakashi-san, I brought a little gift for Naru-chan, Kakashi announced with a cheerful smile, handing over a neatly wrapped package. Tsunade unwrapped it, revealing a set of clothes with dog prints. She sent Kakashi a dry look while Jiraiya and Shizune burst into laughter. I swear, the whole world is trying to make my Naru-chan their summoner, she muttered with a sigh. Kakashi merely sweat dropped. So, others had already tried? Naruko, however, was thrilled, eagerly hugging the clothes to her chest. She climbed onto Kakashi's lap, playing with him happily. Then, in a sudden move, Naruko reached up and pulled down his mask. The room fell silent. Everyone froze, eyes widening in shock as they stared at Kakashi's face. Or rather, the second mask underneath it. There was a collective facepalm as Kakashi smiled, and Naruko giggled at their reactions. A moment later, she yawned and reached her arms toward Tsunade, signaling for her to pick her up. Tsunade smiled as she lifted her, and Naruko snuggled into her embrace, making everyone smile. Feeling a tug on her kimono, Tsunade glanced down to see Naruko looking up at her with innocent eyes. "Is my little Naru-chan hungry?" Tsunade asked, amused. Naruko nodded with a smile, and Tsunade carried her to her room. Meanwhile, Shizune poured tea for Kakashi and Jiraiya, who accepted it gratefully. Jiraiya took a sip before casually asking, "So, why did Tsunade take her to her room? Wouldn't her food be out here?" Shizune answered nonchalantly, "Oh, Tsunade-sama has a special medical technique that allows her to feed Naruko just like a mother would." Both men choked on their tea, coughing violently. "She what?" Jiraiya's eyes widened in disbelief, while Kakashi sat frozen in shock. Shizune chuckled at their reactions. "It's a medical ninjutsu Tsunade-sama developed for orphaned infants in the hospital. Though it was never widely used, it provided her with the perfect way to ensure Naruko receives proper nourishment." Jiraiya and Kakashi nodded slowly, still processing the information. "That kid is all the luck in the world," Jiraiya grumbled under his breath. A moment later, he started chuckling mischievously and stood up. Shizune narrowed her eyes. "I hope you're not planning on peeking, Jiraiya-sama. Do you remember what happened 4 years ago? Imagine what Tsunade-sama would do if she caught you now." Jiraiya froze mid-step, a shiver running down his spine. Kakashi gulped, both of them vividly remembering past incidents. Jiraiya let out a nervous laugh. "Of course not. I was just heading to the bathroom." He quickly sat back down, sipping his tea. A little while later, Tsunade returned, carrying a peacefully sleeping Naruko in her arms. She took her seat, gently stroking Naruko's whisker marks, smiling as the little girl nuzzled closer. Jiraiya handed Tsunade a scroll. "Sarutobi-sensei sent this for Naruko." Tsunade unsealed it, and in a puff of smoke, Monkey King Enma appeared. He glanced at the room before grinning at the sleeping child. "So, this is the little one Sarutobi spoke of. She certainly has Minato's presence. There's a great deal of potential in her chakra alone," he mused. Tsunade's eye twitched, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. She handed Naruko to Shizune and cracked her knuckles. A few moments later, Shizune gently covered Naruko's ears as the 3 men outside the house screamed in pain. "Stop trying to make my baby a summoner. She's only 1 year old, Tsunade yelled, slamming the door shut. The 3 men groaned as they slowly got up, cracking sore joints. Enma sighed. "I didn't even do anything." And with that, he disappeared in a puff of smoke. They returned to the village to attend the grand celebration held in honor of the hero Uzumaki twins. Kushina had organized a magnificent event with the support of the entire council, eagerly awaiting the arrival of Kakashi and Jiraiya. Hiruzen was already present, but since they had been among Minato's closest friends, she especially wanted them to be there. As she noticed them enter the gathering, she walked up to them with a bright smile. "Where have you both been?" "I've been waiting all night," she said warmly. They returned her smile and handed her their gifts, which she set aside before turning back to them. They exchanged a glance, slightly disappointed by her lack of enthusiasm for their presence. It was a stark contrast to Tsunade, who had immediately appreciated and valued the gifts they had given Naruko. However, noticing the abundance of presents already stacked around, they decided not to dwell on it. "Well, Kushina, we stopped by to see Tsunade first to wish little Naruko a happy birthday. It took us a little longer than expected, though we tried to get back as soon as possible," Jiraiya explained. Kakashi nodded in agreement, his usual smile in place. Kushina's expression faltered slightly at the mention of Tsunade and Naruko, but she quickly recovered and nodded. "So, how are Tsunade and Naruko?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of hesitation. "They're doing well," Jiraiya replied with a fond smile. Tsunade wanted to keep things simple, so she only invited those closest to her for a small gathering with dinner. "We left early to make sure we could be here." Kakashi glanced around, observing the number of important figures present. It was rare to see such a large gathering solely for a birthday celebration, and he found himself musing over it. Kushina hesitated for a moment before asking nervously, "And how is Naruko?" Both men were slightly surprised by the directness of the question. Jiraiya, however, took it as a hopeful sign and responded with a reassuring smile. "She's wonderful. I've never seen a happier child, and Tsunade absolutely adores her. She treats Naruko like the most precious treasure," he said, watching as Kushina's expression flickered with emotion. He knew she had begun to recognize the consequences of her choices over the past year. "Yes, the way Naruko relaxes in her arms is heartwarming," Kakashi added. "Tsunade-sama truly has a way with her. Jiraiya-sama, I heard she took her first steps recently?" Jiraiya's smile widened as he recalled the memory. "Yes, I was there when it happened." Tsunade was encouraging her by calling her forward, stepping back each time, and holding her arms open. After a few tries, Naruko stood up and took her first step. Tsunade was so overwhelmed with joy that she started crying. Naruko, seeing her tears, was upset and took even more steps toward her, trying to wipe them away, not realizing they were tears of happiness. "I made sure to capture every moment in pictures. I plan to give them to Tsunade the next time I visit." Kakashi listened intently, impressed by the story, while Kushina stood silent, her heart aching. She imagined her daughter reaching out to her in the same way, but the painful reality pulled her back. Shaking off her thoughts, she turned and walked away toward her daughters, her mood noticeably dimmed. Kakashi observed her departure with a puzzled expression, but Jiraiya only sighed with a somber smile. "How long will you ignore the ache in your heart, Kushina?" Jiraiya thought. "You were the one who distanced yourself, and now Naruko shares an unbreakable bond with Tsunade. If you wait too long, it may be too late to mend what has been broken." With that thought lingering, he made his way toward the bar, seeking a quiet moment to reflect on his memories of Minato, a presence he saw reflected in Naruko every time he looked at her. A moment later, Kakashi joined him, settling beside him with a knowing look. "So, you feel it too?" Kakashi asked. Jiraiya chuckled lightly. "Yes. She reminds me of Minato so much." "Indeed," Kakashi agreed, and together, they entered the bar, hoping for a brief escape from their thoughts. Meanwhile, at the hidden Senju compound, Tsunade and Shizune emerged from the kitchen carrying a freshly baked cake. They smiled as they spotted Naruko sitting on the carpet, happily cuddling with Katsuyu, who was just as fond of her. Tsunade set the cake on the table and crouched beside the two, her eyes filled with warmth. "All right, Naru-chan, let's give poor Katsuyu a break and cut your cake, okay?" she said gently. Naruko let go, giggling, as Tsunade scooped her up into her arms. "I'm sorry for all the trouble she causes you, Katsuyu," Tsunade said with an amused smile. "It's no trouble at all, Tsunade-sama. I enjoy spending time with little Naruko," Katsuyu replied in her melodic voice, making Shizune and Tsunade smile. The cake was cut, party poppers were set off, and laughter filled the room as Naruko played joyfully. The small family gathering was simple yet filled with love. Eventually, as the night ended, Naruko fell asleep in Tsunade's arms, exhausted from the excitement. The celebration concluded on a happy note, leaving warmth in their hearts. 1 year later. It was another peaceful day at the Senju compound. Tsunade sat in the living room, reading a picture book to Naruko, who listened with wide, curious eyes. As she turned the pages, her thoughts drifted to the past year. Jiraiya and Kakashi had visited a few more times, and while Hiruzen had wanted to come as well, his duties kept him occupied, so he mostly sent letters instead. One of Jiraiya's visits had been particularly significant. He had brought up Kushina. It was a topic Tsunade preferred to avoid, but Jiraiya had insisted. He told her that Kushina had been asking about Naruko more frequently and seemed to be coming to terms with her past mistakes. Though Tsunade had dismissed the conversation at the time, a small worry took root in her mind. What if Kushina truly regretted everything? What if she tried to take Naruko away? She shook her head, pushing the thought aside. It was then that she felt a small hand gently touch her cheek. Looking down, she saw Naruko gazing at her with concern. Realizing she had stopped reading, Tsunade quickly wiped her eyes and smiled. "Ka-chan," Naruko said softly. Tsunade's eyes widened in shock before filling with tears of joy. Pulling her daughter close, she kissed her cheek. "Naru-chan, can you say that again?" she asked eagerly. "Ka-chan," Naruko repeated with a grin, snuggling into her embrace. Shizune walked in and immediately noticed the tear stains on Tsunade's face. Concerned, she rushed over. Tsunade-sama, is everything alright? Tsunade beamed with happiness. Naru-chan just said her first words. Shizune gasped in delight. Naru-chan, can you say Nate-chan? She asked excitedly. Naruko tilted her head in confusion. Instead, she simply repeated, Ka-chan. Making Shizune groan in mock frustration while Tsunade laughed. Just then, a familiar voice called out, what's all the excitement about? Tsunade turned to see Jiraiya, but she was too overjoyed to react as she normally would. Instead, she teased, you're lucky you arrived at the perfect time for once. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. Oh? What happened? With a bright smile, Tsunade proudly declared, Naru-chan just said her first words. Jiraiya's eyes widened in surprise before he turned to Naruko with an expectant look. Ka-chan. She chirped again, making Jiraiya laugh and ruffle her hair. That's my goddaughter, he said proudly. And for once, there was only laughter, warmth, and joy in the room. You'll understand someday, Naru-chan, she said warmly, embracing her and encouraging her to say Nei-chan. A few minutes later, Tsunade entered the room, smiling as she dragged a rather battered Jiraiya behind her, wisps of smoke rising from him. She placed him on the floor, and Naruko curiously approached, giving him a gentle poke with a small bat, causing Shizune to giggle. Tsunade-sama, don't you think you went a little overboard? Shizune asked with mild concern. Tsunade simply waved it off. Oh, don't worry. He's built up a tolerance over the years. I didn't even use half the strength I did 7 years ago, she said casually. A moment later, Jiraiya stood up as if nothing had happened, dusting himself off. That's right. The great Toad Sage, Jiraiya, cannot be defeated so easily, especially by such a remarkable lady, he declared before launching into an animated dance, prompting exasperated sighs from the others. Naruko, however, clapped and giggled in delight. You truly understand my genius, Naru-chan, Jiraiya said dramatically, wiping away fake tears before pulling her into a hug. The women in the room exchanged knowing looks. I'll never understand why Naru-chan enjoys that ridiculous dance so much, Shizune muttered, and Tsunade nodded in agreement, though a small smile tugged at her lips. Still, she appreciated Jiraiya's efforts to connect with his goddaughter. Watching him play with the stuffed toads he had brought for her, making silly faces just to hear her laugh, warmed her heart. Tsunade eventually joined them, sharing in the light-hearted moment, but Jiraiya soon straightened and gestured for her to step aside with him. His usual playful demeanor had shifted into something more serious. What's wrong, Jiraiya? She asked, noticing his solemn expression. He gave her a bittersweet smile before handing her a well-worn album. Tsunade took it, her brow furrowing in confusion. This is Minato's photo album and journal, he explained. I brought them from the Namikaze estate after I last visited. Remember when I asked for a bit of Naruko's blood? Realization dawned on Tsunade's face. That's why you needed it. Jiraiya nodded. Tsunade-hime, Naruko is growing up. She's learning to speak, and soon, she'll start asking questions about her parents. I've seen the way she reacts when you read her stories that mention a child's father. There's a sadness, a confusion. When that day comes, I want you to have something to show her, something that belonged to her father. Tsunade looked down at the album in her hands, feeling the weight of his words. After a moment, she gave a small nod before carefully taking the album and journal to the archives in the basement. She secured them safely, sealing the room once more, knowing that one day, Naruko would be ready to see them. Dear YouTube family. That's a wrap for now. I hope you enjoyed this and found it intriguing. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more exciting anime fanfic content coming soon. Thank you for your support. Best regards. 6 Path Weeb.